Hello, party people. Yes, and it's cause for a double celebration today. Because, as you can see from the comment on the screen, I'm here to chat to not one, not two, but 3 successful Scrimba students who are now working in tech. Yeah, at Scrimba, we're often asked, how do I transition from my current career, or maybe my school, into tech? So we thought, what better way to answer that question than to ask some people who've already done it? Yes, we'll hear from Jefferson, who switched careers from doctor to developer and now works for a decentralized finance startup. I'm not totally sure what that is, so hopefully we'll hear from Jefferson too soon, but it sounds very impressive. And we'll hear from Kaidem here, who has solved no fewer than 1,000 LeetCode challenges, which is impressive, and now works for Amazon, which is even more impressive. And finally, Scrimba favorite Tom, who started off as a student on the career path and is now a teacher on the career path. So how's that for the circle of code? Yeah, as usual, we're doing this live, so you can ask the questions you want to know the answers to. Just drop them in the chat. I can see some people already have, and we'll do our very best to answer them all. But first, a big warm welcome to all 3 of you. Thank you very much for coming, all of you. Super excited to hear from you all. Didn't actually warn you in advance about this question because it occurred to me just 5 minutes ago. But what inspired you to switch careers or start a career in tech? Let's start with Jefferson.
First off the bat, a lot of pressure, hey. Yeah, good question. So for me, I was working in healthcare previously. I felt that that was more a decision I made at 18, coming into uni and a lot of people around me taking that pathway. But I feel that before that I was a lot more in line with maths and physics than biology subjects. So when COVID hit and there wasn't as much social distractions per se, I was able to get more in touch with, I guess, coding. And the more I got into it, the more I felt that I didn't want to go without it. So I guess it's a longer backstory to it, but to keep it short, I guess I feel like it's more suited to my personality than what I was doing before.
Excellent. And I think a lot of people can relate to that feeling in COVID lockdown kind of situations where you sort of reevaluated things and maybe made some life changes. Yeah, thank you for that, Jefferson. What about you, Tom? Because I know that you worked in a slightly different field before. What prompted the switch?
Yeah, so I was a teacher for many, many years. And basically, I started to mess around with code a long, long time ago. And it just sort of dawned on me one day that when I had stuff to do for work in the evening, I would just want to get through it as quickly as possible. I just saw it as something to get out of the way so I could get on with the rest of my life. Whereas when I sat down to do some coding, and back at the beginning, it was mostly just, tweaking a WordPress site that I had or something like that. I just found that I was really happy doing that. And I would suddenly notice it was 2 o'clock in the morning and I was still just trying to solve the problems and things. And that my motivation for that was obviously just massively more than for my regular day job at the time. So then I just decided that I would have to gradually change my focus, which I did eventually.
So it kind of sounds like it was the type of thing that you found yourself naturally doing and enjoying, whereas what your previous career was something you kind of had to do rather than necessarily felt inspired with.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe I felt inspired at the beginning, and I certainly enjoyed it for many years. I still enjoyed lots of parts of it at the end. But I suppose when it came to progressing in that career, and am I going to study for further qualifications and things like that, that just seemed completely like something I didn't want to do, as opposed to spending the evening struggling with some CSS, which I found I did actually want to do. So yeah, it kind of guided me, really.
Yeah, interesting. And Kaidam, I'd like to hear from you about your decision to get into tech, because as I mentioned at the start, you've done over 1,000 LeetCode challenges, which is no mean feat. So that suggests to me that you've got a bit of a passion for it, or am I wrong there?
Yeah, so I started with like C programming in college. So basically, I studied in civil engineering. So every branch in our college has to study at least one computer programming language. I fail in that subject because I didn't understand it. So the next semester, I think after 2 semesters, I came back and I got a good grade. And I found that it is a very interesting subject. And my roommates are also from computer science background. I don't know why I am into tech, but I can't resist following coding. So my roommates also ended up working in some big companies like Microsoft as a software development engineer. So knowing that he is working there and he is my roommate, so I started thinking about how to but at least be at a better level or exact level like him. So I saw that I need to develop my problem solving skills, and I found LeetCode one of the LeetCode one of them. That is, I think I found LeetCode like after 2-3 years, not immediately. So initially I started with just like getting into HTML, CSS, and slowly I get to know that I think I need to develop my problem solving skills, and that's how I ended up solving 1,000 LeetCode challenges.
Awesome. Yeah, great story there. I've asked for questions in the chat and they're flooding in. One here which caught my eye. Frank would like to know, what were some of the interviews like that you had to go through? Those might be different for all of you, so let's hear from you all. Tom, what was your, I guess, recruitment process like?
You mean for Scrimba or previous jobs that I tried for, or both?
Oh, let's go for both.
So yeah, I had some interesting experiences. I mean, it can be quite frustrating. I think the most frustrating thing is when they just ghost you. When you apply, maybe you have one interview or 2 interviews, and then you just never hear from them again. I think that is quite common. Just before coming to Scrimba, I had an interview. I went through quite a long way through the process. I think they told me I was in the last 4, and I did a take-home test for them, which I sent off and just never heard from them again. Which I thought was a bit off, given that there's only 4 people left. They can probably manage to write 4 emails. I can imagine they don't want to write 400 emails, but 4 they could, or 3 they could probably do. So that bit was a bit frustrating. But apart from that, everybody I met, everyone I spoke to, whether it was a recruiter or somebody on the team, was always very, very friendly and positive. Nobody said anything to my face, like you're not good enough for this, or you're not ready. I mean, some recruiters probably did at various times. So yeah, only really that one just before Scrimba left me with a bit of a bad taste in my mouth, because I thought, I'd put in quite a lot of work for that application and didn't really go anywhere. But then it came to Scrimba, and the Scrimba process was it was fairly straightforward, actually. I mean, you applied by giving a sample of your work, basically a recording of you teaching some code. And then Per sent me a more specific teaching test, basically with some React. So you just had to set up some, not massively complicated React code and just talk your way through it and how you would set that up for a student. And then after that, it was just a pretty relaxed conversational style interview with Per and Frode and Bob. Well, in fact, Frode was afterwards. It was with Per and Bob, and then I spoke to Frode after I was already in my trial period. And no, that was very smooth, actually. And it was interesting. Scrimba do something which I've never seen, or I hadn't seen in any other job interview process, which is if they like your initial application and they give you a take-home test to do, they actually pay you for your time to do that take-home test. That it gives a kind of a really positive view of the company, that they are a sort of a people-focused company, and that I think is a very good look.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would say, I work for Scrimba, so.
Okay. I do agree, though. Yeah, when we talk sometimes on live streams or Twitter Spaces about job interview red flags, we also mention green flags sometimes, and we always cite that as one of them because I just think it shows some respect for your time, really. So yeah. Nice. Absolutely. How about you, Jefferson? What was your recruitment interview process like?
To be honest, I probably didn't have much of a interview process that I went through. So I guess my journey was, I feel like, where I started was maybe June last year. I decided I was going to code every day. And I didn't, so the first thing I decided, because where I got stuck previously with learning coding was JavaScript, so I pretty much got started straight away on the Scrimba course. And after that, I did another boot camp that was more oriented to the blockchain space, and I guess I got recruited to my first role right before that second boot camp ended, and that was honestly my first interview that I had in this career field, and and I guess that was successful. I've been working there for maybe a year now, so I don't have much, I guess, experience per se with the coding interviews per se to share directly. I'm sure I probably will in the future, but I guess I'm sort of this is an unusual case where I got the role in the first interview that I went to. I haven't really done anymore. It wasn't the first role that I applied to. It might have been within the first 10, but that was the first interview, and essentially it was a 1-hour chat with the founder where he, I guess he spent 20 minutes talking about what he was about, what his company was about, and then we walked through some of the projects that I had done for the next 20 or 30 minutes, and he just sort of asked me to show some code and asked me some specific data structure, that language I was using, and then it was pretty smooth from that, honestly. So I guess it's a bit unusual. It's not the typical interview sort of process.
So when you mentioned JavaScript there, was that the free JavaScript course on Scrimba?
I initially did the free JavaScript course, but then I realized that a lot of React was really popular as a front-end dev technology. So I wanted to learn React as well. So I then did the whole front-end development course, signed up for that, went over that over the next few months. Yeah, that's it. Front-end Developer Career Path. Yeah, and went through that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was really helpful to to learn JavaScript and React. Yeah, can't really recommend anything better.
Awesome. Very nice. Thank you for that. I would like to hear from Kaidem now, because question about how much data structures and algorithms did you prepare? Now, 1,000 LeetCodes by anyone's standards is a lot. My question is, did you find that these topics came up in your interview or recruitment process? And do you use them often in your job now you're hired?
Yes, I think from my first interview, like maybe I had 20, 30 interviews, and out of that 30 interviews, most of them had DS and algo question. It was basically questions on string, data structure, and array. It's a very simple question. Uh, some questions are like find the highest occurring word in a paragraph, or maybe you have to find the vowels in the sentence, only vowels. So what approach would you go? So these simple questions they ask, not very hard. Um, you don't have to go much deep if you're applying for a front-end role, especially because they'll focus more on JavaScript, the basics of JavaScript, like what is event loop. These questions we don't actually get to know until and unless we face some interview. So, and basics of CSS and how would you handle slideshow in a website, like if you have 10 images, how would you handle? So these are the questions they ask. And DS and algo, it depends from company to company. If they focus more on front end, they may skip the DS and algo, and you don't have to prepare much, but I would say that it will help a lot if you have at least understanding of strings and array, which you will be using a lot in your front end role.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Few people coming into the chat and saying hello. Hello to you all. First time here, says Leonard. Nice to have you here. Oh, guitar, saxophone. Yeah, some nice greeting music. Hello to you. Let's move on to the next question now, which is, this is an interesting one which people ask quite a lot. After you decided to switch careers or start a tech career, how long did it take? How long studying? And how much did you study every day/week? Over to you, Jefferson.
Yeah, that's a good question. So that's two questions, I guess. When I decided to switch? Okay. So I guess I decided to switch careers probably early last year. And I guess if I start from the time when I decide, hey, I'm going to code every day, it's probably about, I think I got hired at the start of December, so probably about 6-ish months from making that decision to code every day. And how much did I study? I was working full-time in healthcare at the time, but I was pretty much spending all of my spare time doing learning more coding. It's probably more intense than I'm doing at the moment. I didn't really count how many hours I did, but it was probably every spare moment, because it was a sort of 1 or 2 year period where I didn't go to the gym, where I normally do that regularly, say 3 to 4 days a week, and that was during the period when I was learning to code and getting into a coding career that I did. So for me, I'd say 6. I'd say 6 months to a year, depending on where we started. Maybe per day, probably at least 4 hours, I'd say.
Wow, that's pretty intense on top of a full-time job as well. So well done to you. Yeah, very good. What about
Thank
you,
you.
Tom? What was your journey like?
Yeah, it's quite a difficult question for me to answer in a way, because I worked as a freelance web dev a lot while I was still a teacher. So I think it was in 2013 that I went part-time as a teacher. I'd already done a bit of freelance web dev before that, but yeah, whether it was particularly high quality or not, I wouldn't like to say, but I certainly did some. But it was after 2013 that I more and more started to put effort into web dev work. But I guess in 2015 that it really became my main focus. And at that time, I picked up a lot of work from a local charity where I was their sort of go-to developer, and that meant at least doing some work for them probably every week. So that made quite a big difference. But all of this stuff just happened very, very gradually. I was always teaching in the mornings, and then had all of the afternoons and evenings free. Really hard to remember how much I was studying back in those days. A lot, but I couldn't really put a number on it specifically. But then later on, I guess, well, about 4 or 5 years ago, then I started following syllabuses on Free Code Camp at first, and putting probably a good couple of hours every evening into it. And then more so when the pandemic started, because at that point, by then I'd done quite a lot of freelance web dev work, but I didn't have any framework like React. So that's when I really got stuck into React and was using that a lot, and had, plenty of free time in which to study it. So sorry, that's quite a vague answer, but yeah, at the best, I would say likewise 3 to 4 hours a day of study when I could, but that definitely wasn't always the case. And I think people can achieve a lot studying with the time that they've got. I mean, if your lifestyle allows you 6 hours a week or 3 hours a week, well, you can still learn a lot in that time. And putting in millions and millions of hours isn't always better than putting in a bit less. There are some drawbacks to it as well, potentially. So
yeah, that's a very good point, isn't it? You don't want people to feel discouraged if they can't spend that amount of time, because not everybody can. But doing 3 hours a week is better than doing 0 hours a week, for sure. So yes, thank
we've
you.
spoken to a few people, haven't we, at town halls and things, who have, for example, taking up coding when they were on maternity leave, and actually learned to code while looking after a young child. And obviously they didn't have much time at all, but they still actually managed to do it and get a job at the end of it. So it's definitely doable.
Yeah, most definitely. Interesting to hear as well that you are almost learning on the job, it sounds like, which is a good way to start in tech. So yeah, watch out for opportunities like that. Perfect. Frank is wondering, what were the most difficult things to overcome at your first developer job, either technically or non-technically? Let's hear from Kaidem.
I would say non-technical, because you have to learn soft skills a lot. I guess soft skills are more important than your technical skills, because if you are not having to say some good words about your co-workers, then I don't think anyone would like to work with you. So I noticed this also, that best people who works also are very good, having very good soft skills, and they know when to ask, when to question, when to speak, and when to remain silent. So, and also working as a team and helping in code review. So it's all also about soft skills, where we learn a lot in the first dev job. And technical, technically something, it's, I think you learn it along with your soft skills. Like when someone corrects you, you don't get offended. You try to humble yourself and understand it and say thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because so many people talk about how important soft skills are, but it's not like, well, that I know of, you can go and find an online course and brush up on them. Although now I'm saying that, I remember that on LinkedIn, they do have things like that. So have a look out for that. Yeah, nice to hear about your experience there. Question from Harrison. Wondering if you think sending personalized CVs and cover letters are worth putting a lot of effort into. I have a pretty generic one at the minute, says Harrison. It doesn't mention the company or anything. So what do you think? Is it worth personalizing for every application and putting that time in? Or is it better to have something a bit more generic? Jefferson, perhaps you could shed some light. Did you have to do any cover letters or CV sending?
I can talk from my previous career. So I was working as a doctor, and it's a big grind. You basically have to spend probably 3 months to 6 months of your year, sort of working out how to get hired the next year. And in that case, yeah, you're pretty much, I think you're spending like a third of your time working out how to write the cover letter and how to adjust your CV. So I think like it sort of depends on what your strategy is what I'd say. And sort of on your sort of personal temperament. So I guess personally, I'd prefer personalizing a little bit because there's probably like some filters that you can probably get past with a little bit of effort. But again, you know, if you sort of personalize it to the point of being a love letter, that might be too much of a time hassle. So it's sort of, I'd say, a happy medium that sort of suits what your situation is, how many like hiring opportunities there are to apply to your own personal situation is what would work best.
Yeah, completely. When I've spoken to recruiters on this live stream in the past, they've given me a mix of opinions, really. One of them said, is actually a recruiter turned a developer. And he said, I flat out refuse to ever write cover letters. I don't want to work for a company that demands them. We need to stand up and refuse them, which, I do respect that opinion. And I do think a lot of cover letters are quite pointless and maybe you don't even get read. And then another recruiter I've spoken to said, personalize it to a point, but also protect your energy. So you might have, if you know back-end and front-end, perhaps you'll have a kind of overall template for back-end and one for front-end. And then you can set a 25-minute timer to personalize it for each company, maybe longer if it's like your dream company, for example. But on the whole, don't be spending hours and hours and hours on any cover letter unless it really is, this is my life's purpose is to work for this company. Yeah. What do you think of that, Tom?
Yeah, I was just thinking that I think probably a sort of a hybrid approach where on the one hand, you're just using LinkedIn or whatever to rapidly apply for loads of companies, because on the one hand, it can just be a numbers game, right? It's just a question of getting lucky and you make your own luck by applying a lot. But I think when you come across a job that you think, wow, that job is me, I can really see myself in that job, I really love that job, then I would say it is worth doing anything you can. I totally take the point of that recruiter about cover letters, that they're horrible things in many ways. But if you can do something with your cover letter that's going to improve your chances with that company or with your CV, just tweaking it for that purpose, I think is a really good idea. But just for the jobs that really kind of jump out at you and really seem to be a good fit for you. Because I don't know, I can't help feeling that in a way those are the jobs that you're probably likely to get in the end. I think you get a kind of a feeling. You think, yeah, that I can see myself there, and that kind of that feeling has a high chance of being mutual, I think. So yeah, for those ones, personalize, in my opinion, is a good thing.
Lovely, thank you for that. Ronald asked a question of how did you manage to get the interest of a company with no professional experience, air quotes, as a new developer when 99% of companies want more than 2 years of experience? Very good question, Ronald. Kaidem, how did you manage that?
In my case, they rejected me because of my lack of experience. But
nice. Yes.
But I have to start with the smaller companies where they offer junior roles. So if you're doing it every day, if you're practicing your skills every day, then you'll definitely get like chances. I mean, you'll have your own feeling to apply because you know that you're improving. And then this is how I get into a company with greater than 2 years of experience. But I had to face some tears. I had to cry sometimes because of not having that much years of experience. I do get demotivated, but the only thing is that you have to keep on grinding, keep on being persistent. So because in order to get something, you have to also work for it.
Absolutely. So for those of you who've joined fairly recently, Kaidem completed 1,000 LeetCode challenges and used that as experience. And when people are asking for professional experience, if you don't have it, show them what you do have, and it's something you can build in your own time. So yeah, fabulous there. Zachariah had an interview recently and is asking, is it normal to not feel ready yet? Good question there, Zachariah. What's your take on this, Jefferson? Is there ever a point where you think, yeah, I'm totally ready, or does that time never come?
I think it's pretty normal to feel ready not feel ready and to feel pretty intimidated. It's a sign, because it's a sign that you're jumping out of your comfort zone, right? And sometimes it's the case that the actual fear of doing it is a lot more daunting than actually doing it once you're actually in it. So it's probably, I'd say it's a positive thing if it's feeling a bit uncomfortable. And I've certainly had a lot of instances in the last year where I've gotten a task and it's like, I've never touched this technology before. How am I meant to guess? I don't even know what these terms are. But I guess you just you sort of face that feeling, and you it does feel really daunting, but you face it. And a lot of times I found that you feel a lot better off after having gone through it. You know more than you think you know. So yeah, it is pretty normal, especially in such a rapidly changing area like the area that we're in. But you can also interpret it as a challenge that will help me grow and can be the next step.
You totally can. We always say on live streams and on our town halls and things, if you're feeling uncomfortable, it's actually a good sign because it shows that you're growing. Yeah, happy to hear that. Gina has just joined and says, Tiger, hello everyone. Now, if you don't know what this is about, we have a weekly poll here, which is as follows. If you are new here, please put a bunny rabbit into that chat. And if you've been before, hit me with that tiger. We don't use this information, it's just a tradition. But yes, thank you for reminding me there, Gina. On to the next question, which I think I should ask Kaiden. Chandu, what are the requirements as a web developer to get a job in a FAANG company? I hope you're not going to say 1,000 LeetCode challenges.
Nope. I would say complete the Scrimba Frontend Developer Path. You'll get it easily as a front-end engineer. But you have to make sure that you're putting your real effort, as the instructors say that. Don't just copy and paste your solution. I definitely feel the front-end developer part of Scrimba has all the requirements. I mean, I think if you get into the weekly challenge by Lian, who does every week, and even if you join the bootcamp, I think it is pretty much it will help you at least be a part in a journey to get a job in FAANG company. And also I would say practice some LeetCode questions that they do ask LeetCode questions. You can also use HackerRank. We also have CodeChef, and I mean, I think there are many other websites, but Scrimba Frontend Developer Path is enough because of the unique way of learning experience. Hello.
Happy to hear that. We didn't pay him to say that, by the way. Brilliant. Faris wants to know, are you working from a remote location? What about you, Tom?
I absolutely am working from a remote location. Everyone at Scrimba does. We don't have, well, there is a sort of physical office, sort of, but yeah, basically everyone is working from home, and from all over the place, from Australia to the USA and pretty much everywhere in between.
How are you finding the experience of working remotely?
I think it really suits me, actually. Yeah, I really like it. I think it's a nice way of working. Not for everyone, I'm sure, but yeah, no, I think for me it's right.
Perfect. What about you, Jefferson? Were you remote or going into the office?
Yes, I'm actually the only person. I'm remote, and I'm the only person from Australia in the team. The rest of the team is mostly US based. So actually, my hours are. So the plus side is, yeah, you sort of get to work from home. My side for me is my hours are very strange. I go to sleep at 4 a.m., 5 a.m. and get up at 2 p.m. Because that's where, most of the there's no other person in the team who's in Australia or Southeast Asia.
Do you have any thoughts on, as a junior, whether there are pros and cons on working remotely?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah, let's go with you.
Okay. I think it depends on the personality, to be honest. I think some personalities really thrive from having someone there, like on site, available to ask questions. And certainly in my last field of work, you really need to, especially in your first one year, and even beyond that, you really need someone who's right next to you or who's like within a 1 minute walk away who can go ask questions. But I guess the thing with web dev is there's a lot of material online and a lot of YouTube sort of material. So for personality types who sort of like to sort of more introverts or like to study on their own, it can work. So yeah, I think can work, but depends on the personality.
Yeah, absolutely. Which I think is the beauty of having three, I guess, types of working if you include hybrid as well, because then hopefully there's something for everyone. Kaiden, before we went live, you were talking about how you worked in the office. Can you tell us about your experience of in-person working?
You mean working in office?
Yeah.
Basically, we have a lot of fun. I mean,
Yeah.
because we are sitting, I mean, we are seeing face to face, so it's very easy to ask questions and also understand the company culture, how the work culture is, and your teammates gets to understand you much better, because in remote, most of the people are not willing to turn on their video, so the communication is much more clearer. So that's why, at least for some time, I prefer going to office, at least to make sure that my communications and everything are very clear. So it's good to work in office and also work in remote at the same time.
Yeah, totally. On communication, I typed out a Slack message yesterday, and I have a very clear memory of typing it because I remember making a typo and correcting it. When it came to the meeting that this message was about, the other people had no idea what I was talking about. And I looked and it wasn't there, but I know that I typed it. So I don't know if I typed it and then deleted it instead of sending it, or I don't know, maybe it's a prank. But yeah, so there are pros and cons. So it's a case of choosing which suits your personality best, I suppose. Yeah. Question for Tom, I think, because you mentioned you've done some freelancing in the past. This person would like to know, do you have any advice about writing a proposal when you're going to apply for, I suppose, a freelance project? Any tips for making sure it's you they pick to do the job?
Yeah, I wonder if we're talking here about using sites like Upwork or not, because that makes a big difference. My opinion on proposals in general is that literally all of the freelance work I ever got, I got from face-to-face interaction with the people. I got from speaking to them, from making myself available, to being friendly, to being amenable, to being cheap. Honestly, at the beginning is important because you just want to get those first jobs in. You know, you need the word of mouth. You need to be spreading. You want them, small business owners and people, talk to each other. They share people. If they know someone who's good, someone who's been helpful, they share it around. So anything that I ever did with a proposal was always after the event. It was always like, okay, word of mouth, you're in. Can you just write down now what it is you're offering to do and what the price is, etc., as opposed to writing the proposal first. I think for getting started in freelancing, local word of mouth is a million times better than anything else out there. That said, if you do want to go down the other route of Upwork, etc., and that kind of site, that sort of a pay-per job kind of, excuse me, gig economy kind of thing, and I'm not saying that's wrong, I'm just saying that you have there you are up against the world, obviously, and you have to make yourself shine. There's a lot of YouTube videos and a lot of help out there on how to do that. One technique is to basically do the project, whatever it is, at least some part of it, and then get in touch with the person and say, hey, look, it's pretty much already done. What do you think? You can see that I can do it now. That's possibly one of the best hacks that I've seen for that kind of work. But it is difficult, and you hear a lot of people saying, I've been on this website for 3 months, 4 months, and I haven't got any work whatsoever. And so, yeah, in a sense, I think doing freelancing is really good to get yourself experience, but that it can be as tricky as getting a job. But if you start local, start with people you know, do something for free for somebody who's just starting out themselves. If they're just setting up a new business or something, they're going to be short of cash. Whatever it takes to get your name out there a little bit is the way forward. So yeah, I haven't given a very good answer to the question about writing the proposal, because, as I say, in my experience, it was not really the proposal that got you the job.
That is interesting. So sometimes I see websites for local businesses, I won't name any names. And I think, oh boy, these are just so terrible that even I, not a professional developer, could make something better. I mean, honestly, anyone who's done like module 2 of the career path could probably do a better job. So are you suggesting going up to someone and saying, your website could use some improvement? How about me? How do you kind of approach that? Because people generally don't really say that they need a website, but you know that they do, or they need a better one at least. Any tips for having that conversation?
Well, one reason that I decided to move into a full-time job rather than kind of keep working as a freelancer is because I'm not particularly good at getting myself out there and pushing myself. Excuse me. But I think if you are good at that, that is something that's going to pay dividends. And again, I wouldn't spam them by email at all. I just think it's so easy to ignore, and it comes across as just kind of cheap and slightly dodgy. I mean, no one really likes doing stuff with unsolicited emails. But I think if you can find someone that like that locally, and I think if you can go and start up a conversation with them, if it's in their shop or whatever, then that's a great thing to do. And probably even better if you can say to them, look, I'm just going to show you something. I'm going to come back next week and I'm going to show you something. And next week you come back with a redesigned nav element or something from their site and just saying, look, this would work so much better. Or a really common one on people who have used something like Wix to make their own site, and they've got text over an image, and the accessibility of it is really horrible. You can hardly read it. And perhaps on their screen it looks okay because they're on one side of the image and it spreads on a bigger screen or something like that. So yeah, absolutely. As I say, it's not something that I'm personally very good at, but if you've got that kind of personality, get out there and speak to them face to face is best.
Brilliant advice there. Thank you. Frank's wondering, how did you use mentors or support at your first dev job? I'd like to hear from you, Jefferson. How did that structure kind of work? And did you get to ask a lot of questions, or did you feel a little bit like working out on your own? And how did you manage that?
Yeah, so I'd say it was more working out on my own sort of thing. There probably wasn't a lot of formal mentorship in place. And I guess to give it a bit of context, it's a smaller startup. So I guess the team doesn't really, and it's a team of about 20-ish people. So everyone's sort of really, I guess, busy doing, trying to get something done. And there was a dev team of 5, and they were constantly trying to push out new products. So there wasn't really that much formal mentorship or sort of. I mean, there was always say dev there's check-ins every day, and I would ask a question if I was stuck. But I'd say probably 80% of the time was probably more, I felt like me working out how to do something by myself, which is, I guess, also a personality thing as well. But I think if it's, say, a bigger company, there's more formal mentorship and training pathways available, then there's, and you're probably more expected to ask more questions as well, rather than if you go in a smaller startup environment, you're more expected to get stuff done running pretty quickly.
Yeah, and that's a great question to ask in the interview. What does it look like to be a junior developer in this company? Or have you had junior developers before, and what's your expectation of them? So really find that out before accepting the job, just so you know that it's right for you. Like Jefferson said, different setups work for different personalities. You might not want a lot of support or mentorship, but you might do. So just make sure that you're going in there with the right expectation and it's suitable for you. Question specifically for Kaidem. After acquiring, which programming skills did you understand that you're ready for big companies? Now, this here is Kaidem's LeetCode. So I didn't actually know you could make profiles like this. Very nice. So Kaidem did 1,000 LeetCode challenges. Yes. Was there a point where you realized, Kaidem, that you're ready to apply for big companies like Amazon now?
After acquiring which programming skills? The ability to understand a question and find an approach to solve the question. I would say that skill made me confident. Just to understand a question is something which made me more confident. And if I know a certain skill, like how do I say, if I know how to use map, JavaScript map, key value pair, then I would use that for solving certain things like counting the unique number of characters in a sentence. So when did I apply for big companies? It was just a global. I think I applied it like on my second year, and I didn't get any reply. But I think the big companies noticed me when I participated in their global hiring challenge. So I just sort of gave the challenge, and a few weeks later, they just asked me for an interview. So it's very hard to get noticed by big companies. So I would say word of mouth and referral would be the best option. The big companies are always looking for people, and they always ask the employees for referral. So that would be the best way to go for the big companies. But how did I feel ready? When did I feel ready is when I feel like I can do more than what I'm doing right now. Like I feel like this job, I can understand it completely. I think I can do much more than this. So it's like you are saturated. Your skills are saturated. So you're very confident that you need a promotion or something. So
Yeah. No, I think I understand what you mean. You feel ready to take the next step, basically.
yes, in order to get saturated in your skill, you need to be consistent.
Yeah, that is an excellent point. Thank you for that. Couple of questions asking about projects here. So we always say at Scrimba, don't we, Tom, that the way to get better is to build your own projects. This question here is asking, how do you decide what projects to build? Very good question. And where can you see projects to build and add to your portfolio? So basically asking the same thing. Any tips on that? How can you build up a nice portfolio and build projects which are going to look good to potential employers?
Sorry, is that for me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think where can you see projects to build? I think that's a mistake, thinking that you can find somewhere a list of projects you can build which are better than any other list of projects that you can build in any other course. I think what you want to do to really stand out, the thing that really, really looks good, is to create something from scratch which solves a problem that you've come across. So whatever you're doing, whether you're a student, whether you're working in another industry, find something which you think, I wish I could do X, Y, and Z more quickly. I wish I had a specific tool for doing that, and then build it. So then at the interview stage or wherever it comes up, you can talk really about the entire process. It's clear that you haven't just taken this from a tutorial, you haven't copied this from YouTube, you haven't copied this from someone's GitHub. You've got something that you've really, really made. It actually does something that's needed, and it's completely unique. So I think rather than looking for projects or, and there are great projects out there, of course, which are really, really good for training, and you should definitely be doing that to practice your skills. But when it comes to the portfolio, I think having one really, really standout project that you've made yourself from scratch is going to work wonders.
Yeah, I think it will be so much easier to talk about that project as well, because presumably you'll have a big interest in it if it solved a problem that you've had. And if it doesn't get you anywhere, at the very least, you've solved a problem of your own. So win-win there. Yeah.
Maybe you'll end up setting up your own SaaS and becoming a multimillionaire through it. You never know.
Yeah. Exactly. Like the person who made Wordle, it was just a gift for their partner, I think, and sold it to the New York Times. And I think it's important to point out that it doesn't have to be anything serious. I mean, maybe it doesn't even have to solve a problem. It could just be a game that you dream up or something like that.
Games are great, actually, because, games, if you're just building a layout or a sort of a regular website, a dashboard or something, the JavaScript you need is not necessarily going to be particularly complicated, but in a game, it nearly always is. You've got a lot to get stuck into and a lot of opportunity to showcase your skills. So no, I think a game that you would like to play is another great idea.
Yeah, and if it's a really good game, then they might keep thinking of it and actually playing it, which will definitely get your foot in the door. Perfect. I would like to finish off with a question I thought of earlier, which is motivation hacks. So you've all put a lot of time and effort into breaking into tech. Do you have any tips for people about how to stay motivated? Let's start with Jefferson.
Yeah, I think I'm going to borrow what Kaidem said about being consistent, because once I feel like for me, the turning point in terms of getting into coding was when I decided, hey, I'm going to code every day. Before that, I did have a burst for a few months, but then I got distracted, and then I came back into it, and I really felt like, hey, I'm gonna, even if it's, I'm pretty sure somewhere in the front-end dev course this is said as well, if you just sort of do it even just half an hour a day, just doing it every day sort of really builds up, and it's always especially if you're getting into some new framework or technology or language, frustrating at the time, but if you sort of keep at it every day, and you look back even say a month or 2 months, you know that knowing how far you've come from being consistent is a big motivating factor, as well as the thrill of solving what is initially a really daunting problem is, I'd say, some emotional hacks.
Yeah, great. Actually, someone else I had on this live stream, I asked a similar question, and she said, you actually don't need to be motivated, you just need to show up, which I thought was really good advice, because I think with the idea of motivation, sometimes you can fall into the trap of thinking, well, today I'm not motivated, so I kind of can't do it. But actually, that's not true. You don't need to be looking forward to it necessarily. You just need to get your hands on the keyboard, as Bob Zirol says. Kaidem, anything to add to that?
Have faith.
Yes, you can do it.
Excellent. And act on your faith. Like if you just have a faith that you'll be working in some big company, also act on it. That means to be persistent and consistent, so that you're not just talking but also acting on it.
Yes, totally. Yeah, you have to believe in yourself, but you also have to show up to make sure that it happens. So, yeah, consistent and persistent. They're very good advice. And finally, to Tom.
I think on top of everything that's already been said, which is great, learning to live with the inevitable voices in your head that tell you that you can't, or you shouldn't, or you're wasting your time, or that there's better things to be doing. You can't make them go away unless you're lucky enough that you just don't have those, but most people do. But I think you can learn to allow them to be there without having them actually controlling you. So you can just kind of listen to what they have to say and then focus in on your work with a little bit less chatter going on in your mind. And then I think, as Bob Zirrell says, once you've got your hands on the keyboard, it's far easier to be motivated for something that you're already doing. You know, if you say you'll write just one line of code, make that promise to yourself, you'll write one line of code, I bet you'll end up doing more. But if you don't, maybe that's all you can manage that day. And that's just the way it goes sometimes. And there's no point in beating yourself up about not doing it. You know, if it's not happening that day, that's quite normal for all of us. So come back to it the next day. But definitely make a little commitment and just get that commitment finished, just that one line of code. And you'll probably end up spending the next couple of hours there.
That's it. And if you find that whatever you're trying to do isn't happening 2 or 3 days in a row, maybe switch to something else. It's like Scrimba CEO Per always says, if a course is boring you, just switch to another course. Like, don't feel the need to complete it just because you've started it. I mean, you do need a certain amount of commitment, obviously, but don't torture yourself. If you're looking for a course which won't bore you, check out the Frontend Developer Career Path. You'll find Tom's material on there. Which module was it again, Tom? 7?
It is 4 and 5 and 7.
4, 5, and 7. Yes, currently from Tom. They're more in the making, I'm sure. So go and check that one out. And you can also check out our free React tutorial with Bob Zirrell, very, very popular, and Scrimba, our free JavaScript tutorial. So yes, I hope that will keep you busy until the next live stream, which will be on Friday, where Michael and I have got our snow gear out because we are discovering Alpine.js. Yes. I hadn't really thought about Alpine.js at any point before I prepared the code for this stream, but it's really nifty. Yeah, you can make things like buttons and modals and nav bars very easily with it, so it could save you a lot of time. Recommend hitting that up and finding out what it's all about. Well, massive thank you, all 3 of you, for coming and your insightful answers. It was wonderful to have you here. Wishing you the best of luck, of course, for your continued tech career. And that's all we have time for. But if you enjoyed this, let us know by giving us a thumbs up and hitting subscribe so you don't miss any future streams. Bye for now, everyone.